Now, throughout the past 12 months, we've all become familiar with public health messages aimed at saving lives and protecting the NHS. There have been huge medical advances as day by day scientists have gained more knowledge about how to tackle coronavirus. This morning there was the further good news that the number of weekly deaths in England and Wales has fallen below the 5-year average for the first time since last August. Our health correspondent Catherine Burns reports.
Know your enemy. It's the first rule of warfare. But as our battle began, coronavirus was new and unfamiliar. As the Prime Minister reminded us, the main weapons most of us had were soap and hot water.
You've got to do two verses.
From the start, the worry was making sure that the health service wouldn't collapse under the pressure.
At the worst case scenario, the NHS would not cope with the number of ventilator beds that were required, nor could any healthcare system.
And so that system braced itself. Conference halls were converted to field hospitals. In the end, though, the Nightingales were barely used. Instead, on the front line, operating theatres and empty wards were turned into intensive care units. We had no life-saving drug. The sickest hospital patients were put on ventilators. Medics used a technique called proning, turning people onto their fronts to take the pressure off their lungs. It was painstaking work.
So we've just unproned our first case. Took 7 of us.
Meanwhile, scientists were battling away behind the scenes, clinical trials testing possible treatments, and in June, a breakthrough.
Not only is this the first drug that's improved survival, but it's available worldwide immediately and is affordable. That's fantastic news for patients.
And of course, vaccines. The first volunteers tested them in Oxford last spring. By December, another first. Margaret Keenan became the first patient in the UK to get a vaccine out of clinical trials. And now, almost 28 million people have had their first dose. The new year, though, was brutal for the NHS. Hospital admissions and deaths were higher than ever before. The Office for National Statistics says there have been more than 145,000 deaths involving coronavirus since lockdown started. But things are getting better. For the first time since September, UK deaths are now below the level you would normally expect. Today, though, a warning.
There are going to be lots of bumps and twists on the road from here on in. There will definitely be another surge at some point, whether it's before winter or in next winter, we don't know.
And so the fight to keep pace with the virus will continue. At the same time, the NHS has record waiting lists and also to deal with the long-term effects of COVID. Now, though, is a moment to mark just how far we've come. Catherine Burns, BBC News.
Heading abroad could now land you with a £5,000 fine. The government says new coronavirus laws, due to come into force next week, will target people from England travelling without good reason. Our transport correspondent Caroline Davis reports.
The empty beaches may be calling, but they aren't in reach yet. Holidays are already illegal, and anyone travelling abroad needs to have a declaration form. But in addition, on Monday, when the stay-at-home rule ends, the government plans to introduce a £5,000 fine for anyone travelling internationally without a legally permissible reason. Those include work where it's not reasonably possible to do it from the UK, study where it's considered necessary, elite sports for training or competition, medical, such as a clinical appointment, funeral or wedding of a close family member living outside the UK. These are very similar to the existing rules. This doesn't include visiting grandparents, so families like Dorota's whose parents are in Poland will have to wait to be reunited with their grandson.
We mentioned grandpa, grandma and the rest of the family, and he just goes kind of quiet and silent and withdraws, and it's worrying me. I think so many of us have valid reasons to want to go on holiday, but I do think that there's a difference between going for leisure versus going to see your family, especially if young children are involved who perhaps haven't met or haven't seen their close family.
The law could be in place until the 30th of June, but the government say this doesn't change the timeline where international travel could restart on the 17th of May.
I entirely understand people's yearning to get away and have a summer holiday. And we're looking at that question right now as part of the Global Travel Task Force, as it's called. which will report in the middle of next month. And the earliest that we'll take any steps will be the 17th of May.
But some in the travel industry are worried that this is sending mixed messages.
It's just so frustrating. You know, finally there was some light at the end of the tunnel. We had some optimism. And then the travel industry wakes up to headlines like this. It just creates more uncertainty when actually we still don't know anything. You know, all of this speculation is exactly that. It's speculation until the Travel Task Force reports back on April the 12th. And to have these fines come into force now, it's just another blow. You know, if the government wanted these draconian measures, they should have been introduced back when international holidays were first banned. It's more scaremongering.
The industry is keeping its eyes fixed on the government's next announcement in the hope it will bring them certainty and brighter news. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Let's talk to the travel documentary maker and presenter Simon Reeves. Simon, good to see you. All eyes on the 17th of May, as we were hearing then, but when do you reckon you'll be leaving England for a break?
Oh my goodness, I just don't know. I don't think any of us really, as the in your package that you had there, somebody was saying, you know, that everything is speculation at the moment. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have to make it viable and possible. Travel is so important. We can't just think of it, forgive me for saying, as just being a break. It's such a critical aspect of our lives, the ability, the freedom to go out and travel and explore. Now, you still can at the moment, and you still can under the existing laws, you can still travel, essential travel. Some of the reasons that you're allowed to travel were mentioned just then. There's also, if you're going to going to a wedding, if you're getting married yourself, if you're attending a funeral, these are all, if you have legal obligations to vote, these are all reasons that you're still allowed to travel. It's very important, I think, that people swat up on what travel is still possible to do, whether it applies to them. And of course, it's critical that they swat up about the rules and the regulations in relation to testing and of course, insurance as well. It's very critical. People think about travel a little bit more than perhaps we used to, but it is critical we do because it's really important. And travel is so we mustn't lose the chance to go on journeys. We mustn't lose that ability. So we have to do what we have to do to enable us to go away, I would say.
And in terms of the psychology of all this, you talk about sticking to the rules. Many people now getting vaccinated, and there is a belief that is the hope, that once you've got a vaccination, you're going to be able to travel more freely. And yet new research suggests that people aren't thinking like that.
Well, people are certainly, the new research I think is fascinating. It's been done by Battleface Insurance, and it looks into whether people are willing, Brits are willing to carry a COVID vaccination passport. And the research is quite worrying about this. It does show that people aren't entirely confident about it, that only a small number are willing to carry a COVID passport. A small number even are willing to pay a sensible amount, frankly, for a COVID test. Now, I already have to have a little travel medical passport. I've got it out to show you. This is it's small and not very impressive, but it has some of the details of some of my vaccinations that I've had to have. You know, it shows my jab for tick-borne encephalitis is up for renewal. You know, this is the sort of thing that people have to do to go to more exotic parts of the world. It might be something we need to do a little bit closer to home. I think what I'd like to say, my little message, as it were, is to remind people of the value of travel. It is not just about going on a holiday. It is about expanding your mind, living your life. Travel is so fundamental. And of course, it's essential for countries that we know and love, where millions of people depend on the tourism industry to survive. And of course, wild areas out there need visitors to come and pay their entrance fee to a national park or somewhere like that. So it's important we travel. And I think we need to reassure people that we will be able to travel. I personally have no doubt about that. We will get through this and we will be able to go out there and explore again. But I think we need to be a bit realistic about it. We might need to make a few more, we might need to tick a few more boxes, check a few more websites about the rules and the restrictions, and think about things like COVID tests, COVID vaccination passport, and of course insurance.
That's all very well, Simon, and everybody will agree with you about the need to travel, and we'd all love to. But we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and at the moment, if we look at what's going on, particularly in Europe, the idea of being able to travel in the next month or two seems very far-fetched.
Keep that flame alive, though. We have to. I think you talked about initially, we talked about the COVID, the vaccination passport. Now, there are a lot of people who do believe this is absolutely a route to making travel possible. I don't know about you, I had my COVID vaccination last week. I'm incredibly young, of course, but I've got a pre-existing condition apparently. But all I get is this tiny little piece of paper here showing I've had the vaccination. That is not going to wash if I turn up at a border and say, look, I'm okay, I'm completely safe. I think we're going to need the government, frankly, to get involved with industry, with organising some sort of scheme whereby people who've been vaccinated, who've got antibodies within them, who are basically safe to mingle and safe to travel, can prove that they've got that ability and almost right, quite frankly. Travel is so fundamental. Of course, you're so right. There is a pandemic on. We do not want people dying, but we also need to live. And travel is an essential part of that for many of us.
Simon, it's really good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks. That's Simon Reeves.
The pandemic's increased the focus on remote working, tools that enable that, whether it be Zoom or Teams. Over the last year, we've all had to embrace remote working, and companies behind the tech have done very well indeed. One of the beneficiaries is Slack. This is a workplace messaging app which received a $27.7 billion takeover from Salesforce late last year. So will Slack's growth continue as we go back to the office? Well, I'm joined now by the Chief Executive and co-founder of Slack, Stewart Butterfield. Welcome to the programme. Just tell us about how your company has grown during this coronavirus pandemic. I mean, for you at Slack, has it been a real driver of sales?
Yeah, it definitely has. We're a little bit different than many enterprise companies in that we have a huge variety of customers. So over 150,000 customers now. Among them, the biggest credit card issuer in the US and the #1 media company and many other large enterprises. But obviously, there's many small businesses as well. So we see both the customers that are doing well and expanding, continuing to hire, expand their usage. And we also see a lack of expansion or even businesses shutting down, suffering layoffs at the other end. But overall, for us as a business, it was a year of strong growth. We added 46% more customers, 43% more revenue, and a bunch of other statistics. But it's also us as a company. 40% of our employees now were hired post-pandemic. And it's really been kind of culturally fascinating to watch how this cohort of employees is different or largely not different than the ones that came before, despite the fact that they haven't been in a physical office with one another yet.
How hard has it been for you as CEO to manage during this last year? And given the fact that you were approached by Salesforce, you've accepted a deal to merge with them and or be taken over, whichever way you want to put it. There's been a lot going on for you personally. How have you found it?
I'm one of the lucky ones. And I think people have, among our employees at least, and those I've talked to at other companies, fall into one of three categories. And there's people who are, honestly are a little bit better off. They don't have to commute anymore. They have a comfortable home. They like spending time with their family. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's people who, single parents who have no access to childcare. There's people who chose to live in small apartments so they could have the excitement of the city and don't have that excitement, but now they just have the small apartment. And then there's a group that are, kind of split. I'm one of the fortunate ones personally, but that asymmetry in the impact has been something that's been really fascinating. And at the same time, while many businesses are flourishing during this time, you still have to invest a lot in the mental health of employees who have undergone something that no population has ever undergone before.
So what's next for you at Slack? Because clearly you've seen huge growth. Companies who didn't know about you have found out about you, they've connected with you, they're enjoying your way of communicating, etc. What are you going to do next? Will you go beyond just the business customer, for example? Will you try and take on the likes of WhatsApp and just go for anyone and everybody who wants to have a conversation with others?
Well, we have recently launched what we call Slack Connect, which allows people in different organizations to communicate, but it's not quite as wide open as WhatsApp. And I think our focus is going to remain on business. This year, I would say the overall lesson or the refrain has been never waste a crisis. And when systems are thrown this far off equilibrium, there are real opportunities. And I don't mean opportunities to grow the business. I mean opportunities to reinvent how we work. There's a possibility, I think, when the edginess around the pandemic kind of slows down, when more and more people are vaccinated and we can do things like go to the pub or get our nails done and have a massage or something like that, the regular amenities of life return. I think there'll be more and more interest and more effort put into kind of capturing what worked for people about this period, and the best of the previous world as well. But it's really an opportunity to evolve and to change and to look critically at the way that we have worked and look for opportunities. So for us as a business, that means more and more focus on asynchronous work. We think employees need flexibility. People want to work just as hard, but on their own time.
And just briefly, Stewart, what's your biggest fear? I was looking yesterday, there were real difficulties with Slack. We had lots of your users, they couldn't access it. There were technical problems. One user tweeted, I still don't have access to Slack. I've got an important event in a few hours and all my communication is on Slack. What's your biggest fear when it comes to this company?
That's a great question. I think that we won't fully realize the opportunity because we're landed, partly by hard work, but mostly by luck and timing in an incredibly strategic nexus. And we just see opportunity everywhere. We're moving as fast as we can to pursue it. But obviously, when one is given that kind of opportunity, it's a lot of responsibility to achieve what is possible to be achieved.
All right, good to talk to you. Thanks very much. Stewart Butterfield there, Chief Executive, Co-founder of Slack, joining us live from Colorado in the US.